Good morning everyone, I'm Kathy and welcome back to the Human Anatomy and Physiology class. Today, let us discuss about the digestive system. At the end of today's lesson, you will be able to relate the anatomy of the digestive tract to its functions, relate the anatomy of the accessory organs to its functions in digestion, outline the essential activities involved in digestion, describe the digestive activities along the digestive tract. Our slides contains the following: structure and functions of digestive system, structure and functions of accessory organs, essential activities of digestion, and activities of digestive tract. Let me start by asking you, what did you had for breakfast? Hold that thought and then later on, you will understand on what are the nutrients that you obtained in the food that you had for breakfast. Alright. Our body needs nutrients to survive. Nutrition is a process by which organisms obtain food and energy for growth, repair, and maintenance of the body. Nutrients are obtained through feeding, or the intake of food into the body. That's the main reason why I asked, what did you had for breakfast? And the major classes of nutrients are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Let's look back on what you learned in topic 1 about digestive system. We said that it performs mechanical and chemical processes of digestion. It is for the absorption of nutrients, elimination of waste, and comprises of the digestive tract or gastrointestinal tract. And so down here in the photo, we had our oral cavity or your mouth, and then you have your pharynx or your throat, you have your salivary glands, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, small intestine, large intestine, and then on the left side, you have your liver, gallbladder, appendix, rectum, and anus. Now, let us take a closer look at each of the components. First, you have your oral cavity or your mouth. Your mouth contains your salivary glands for the secretion of saliva. It helps to moisten food. It lubricates your oral cavity or your mouth. And then it contains lysozyme, which are antibacterial, and contains salivary amylase, which is an enzyme. Food and saliva mixture forms bolus. Bolus is a Latin word which literally means ball. And then you have your teeth. Your teeth helps you to cut and grind food, breaks down food into smaller particles, and then mixes food with your saliva. Your tongue and cheek muscles hold food in place and helps to propel food into your throat. Okay, for esophagus, it's a muscular tube that extends from your throat all the way to your stomach. You can see in the photo, you have here your bolus of food. Okay, it passes through your esophagus. So what happens in peristalsis is that it is a rhythmic contractions that propel food in a forward direction along your digestive tract. It is lined with moist stratified squamous epithelium which produce a thick mucus. And then moving on, you have your stomach. Your stomach is a muscular bag that continues from the esophagus. Now, remember just now, from the mouth you form the bolus, right? The food bolus. And then it passes through your esophagus. When it is inside your stomach, bolus or the food ball mixes with the gastric juice, it forms chyme. You have large folds in the mucosa and submucosa layers. These large folds are also called rugae or wrinkles. As you can see from the photo, in the mucosa and submucosa, it contains rugae or wrinkles. Okay, so that it will allow the stretching and extension of the stomach walls. Chyme exits the stomach and then enters the duodenum. via the pyloric sphincter. Okay, in your stomach, you will have your stomach secretions. The gastric glands in the mucosa secrete gastric juice into the stomach cavity via tube-like structure called gastric pits. Your endocrine cells secrete hormones. I summarized a table here. So, you have your mucus secreted by the mucous neck cells. And what it does is to coat and protect stomach lining from digestion by pepsin. And then you have hydrochloric acid inside your stomach secreted by parietal cells, which converts pepsinogen to pepsin, stops the action of the salivary amylase, and it is antibacterial. Next, you have pepsinogen secreted by the chief cells, precursor of pepsin, and pepsin digests proteins to smaller polypeptide. Hormones, example would be gastrin, secreted by the endocrine cells. Gastrin controls gastric juice secretion. After the stomach, let's move to the small intestine. Your small intestine is about 6 meters long, and it extends from the stomach to the large intestines. As you can see from the photo here, the duodenum is about 25 cm. And then you have your jejunum, which is about 2.5 meters. And then you have your ileum at the lower part here, that is 3.5 meters long. Your small intestine is the major site for digestion and absorption. Okay. And then in your stomach, you have your intestinal secretions that includes mucus, digestive enzymes, and regulatory hormones. Adaptations of the small intestine. Increased surface area for the absorption. You have your mucosa and submucosa form circular folds. Next, in the photo here, you have the villi. Villi are finger-like projections that extends from the mucosa into the small intestinal lumen. Then blood capillaries bring absorbed amino acids and glucose to the liver, and from there to the rest of your body. Lymphatic capillaries bring lipids to the lymph circulation. From the small intestine, let's move to the large intestine. Cecum, located at the right quadrant of the abdomen. Okay, when it's on the right quadrant of the abdomen, here in the photo, it is here on the left. Cecum is at the right quadrant of the abdomen at the proximal end of the large intestine. Small intestines drains into the cecum. And you have here your small tube, that is your appendix, and it extends inferiorly from the cecum. If it's inferior, remember in the anatomical terms, it means that it is below. Okay, pointing down, which is this one. Then you have your transverse colon, you have your descending colon, and your sigmoid colon. Okay, remember the locations, okay? As you can see from our photo on the left side of the screen. Then your rectum, down here, is a straight muscular tube. Then you have your anal canal. It opens into the anus, guarded by anal sphincter. You have here your internal anal sphincter and external anal sphincter. Large intestine is for the water and mineral absorption, vitamin K production by bacteria, formation of feces, and defecation. Now let us look at the accessory organ to the digestive system. Your teeth, your tongue, salivary glands, and then you have your liver, which mainly produces bile. Then you have your gallbladder, which stores bile, and then your pancreas. We'll discuss bile and gallbladder. Liver, you have your hepatic portal veins, this blue tube here. Okay? It carries molecules absorbed from your digestive tract to the liver. Next, we have hepatocytes or liver cells arranged in lobules that produces bile. The bile contains water, bile salts, cholesterol, lecithin or phospholipids, and bilirubin. Bile is important for digestion and absorption of fats. Flow of bile canaliculi to the hepatic bile duct and common hepatic duct to the gallbladder and common bile duct and small intestine or your duodenum. Okay, look at the photo. We have here your gallbladder stores and concentrates bile produced by the liver until needed to digest fatty food in the small intestine. And the green one, which is your hepatic bile duct, carries bile within the liver. Then your common hepatic duct carries bile out of the liver to the gallbladder or common bile duct. Then your common bile duct carries bile to the small intestine. Bile salts and fat digestion. Production of bile. You have the mixture of water and bile salts and cholesterol plus bilirubin or your bile pigment. Presence of food containing fats stimulate the release of bile from the gallbladder into the small intestines. Bile salts aid fat digestion or emulsification and facilitate fat absorption through micelle formation. Essential activities of digestion. There are 6 essential activities. You have ingestion, propulsion, physical digestion, also known as mechanical digestion. Then you have chemical digestion, absorption, and defecation. In the photo we have here, we'll first start with your mouth for the ingestion of food. The next activity will be propulsion, wherein you swallow your food. Then you also have peristalsis. The next, you have your mechanical digestion, which is chewing in the mouth, churning the stomach, and segmentation in the small intestine. That is the pink color arrow. Then you have your chemical digestion, which is a green droplet. Then for the absorption, what you need to do is for absorption is for the nutrients and water to blood vessels and lymph vessels. And water is absorbed to the blood vessels. Then all the way down is defecation. Peristalsis is responsible for the propulsion of food through most of the digestive tract. And there is a rhythmic contraction of smooth muscles, as you can see in steps 1, 2, and 3. It is caused by the alternate contractions of the circular and longitudinal muscles in the walls. When the circular muscle contracts, the longitudinal muscle relaxes. The wall of the gut constricts. That is, it becomes narrower but longer. Then the food is thus squeezed or pushed forward. When the longitudinal muscles contracts, the circular muscle relaxes. And then our gut dilates. That is, it becomes wider and shorter. This widens the lumen for the food to enter. Chemical digestion starts in the mouth. Your digestive secretions break down complex food molecules into their chemical building blocks. Secretions typically contain water, various enzymes, acids, and salts. And the process is completed in the small intestine. Okay, start with the mouth and chemical digestion all the way down to the small intestine. Like in the diagram here, you have a polysaccharide, then you have your proteins and your triglyceride. Polysaccharide will be converted into oligosaccharides, then disaccharides, and monosaccharides. From bigger molecule, it becomes you break it down further to make it simpler and smaller. Then for the proteins, it will further break down into large peptides, smaller peptides, until you have the amino acids which your body can absorb. And for the triglycerides, you have monoglycerides and fatty acids. Just now we said that it starts in the mouth, mastication in the mouth. Mastication, it basically means chewing in the mouth. Then you have the mixing and churning in the stomach. Okay, mixing waves inside the stomach. It's a mixing wave. Relatively weak contractions propagated down the stomach walls. Mixes bolus with gastric juice thoroughly to form chyme. Okay, so remember, inside here in the photo, you have your chyme already, which is a combination of your food and the gastric juice. Then down inside, there's a peristaltic wave, strong contraction that forces your stomach, that forces whatever is inside your stomach to be squeezed down to the pyloric sphincter, going to the duodenum. And then you have segmentation in the small intestine. To mix the intestinal contents, segments of the intestine alternate between contraction and relaxation. Then you have your intestinal contents are spread out in forward and backward direction. Forward and backward. Okay? You will try to remember what we did with the peristalsis. And then it distributes chyme throughout small intestine for efficient digestion and absorption. Remember a while ago I asked what did you have for breakfast? If you ate rice or bread this morning, this is what happens. Carbohydrate chemical digestion. It begins in the mouth, and your salivary amylase hydrolyzes starch, which is a plant polysaccharide, oligosaccharides or dextrins, and maltose. And food only stays for a short while in the mouth, and salivary amylase is inactivated by the low pH in the stomach, so starch digestion continues in small intestine. Okay, just like in the photo, you have your salivary amylase. And then your pancreatic amylase hydrolyzes starch and dextrin to maltose. Remember, now you have your starch glycogen, then it will be converted to broken down into disaccharides. You can either have maltose, sucrose, and lactose with the help of the pancreatic amylase. Then your epithelial cells of small intestines produce disaccharidases, which are bound to microvilli. Maltase will convert maltose to 2-glucose. Then sucrase will break down sucrose to produce 1-glucose and 1-fructose. Then lactase will break down lactose to 1 molecule of glucose and 1 molecule of galactose. If you had meat for breakfast, like probably chicken, or soya bean, or tofu, how will your system digest the protein? It will begin in your stomach. Then you have your pepsinogen converted to pepsin by hydrochloric acid. Pepsin hydrolyzes proteins into large polypeptides. Then it continues in the small intestine, wherein your pancreatic proteases further break down the large polypeptides into smaller polypeptides. Okay, down here, from large to short, it happens because of the pancreatic proteases. And then, from that point, you have your short polypeptides and amino acids. You will need peptidases bound to the microvilli. Finally, will hydrolyze these polypeptides into tripeptides, dipeptides, and amino acids. Lipid chemical digestion. Okay, what happens to the oily components of the meat that you eat? Maybe you ate the chicken skin, then the fat, then you had something fried. Then lipid digestion begins in duodenum. It begins with bile emulsifying the triglycerides. And you have 3 lipases responsible for lipid digestion are lingual lipase, gastric lipase, and pancreatic lipase. Your pancreatic lipase hydrolyzes triglycerides so that your triglyceride will be further broken down into monoglycerides and 2 molecules of fatty acids. This is the summary of the chemical digestion. Let's say you had your carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Here you have from the oral cavity is what happens in the esophagus, in the stomach, and the small intestine. Remember that just now we had our mechanical and chemical digestion. All these digestive processes aims to do one goal, and that is to convert your food into molecules small enough to be absorbed by the epithelial cells of the intestinal villi. You have your carbohydrate, lipid, protein, water, and mineral so that it will be absorbed by the epithelial cells of the intestinal villi. Okay, carbohydrate absorption. Of course, in the small intestine, monosaccharides are co-transported with sodium into small intestinal epithelial cells. Okay, in the photo, you have sodium there. Okay, this exits the epithelial cells by facilitated diffusion. Okay, from the photo here, number 1, you have your monosaccharide plus sodium ions. Then it moves through facilitated diffusion. And then it will enter the blood capillaries, which is the color red tube here, and are delivered to the liver. Lipid absorption. Bile salts aggregate around digested lipids to form micelles. Micelles attach to surface of epithelial cells and the lipids enter by simple diffusion. Then lipids are converted back to the triglycerides and coated with proteins to form chylomicrons. You have your chylomicrons. It will exit the epithelial cells by exocytosis. Chylomicrons eventually will be carried all the way to the liver. Then the chicken that you had for protein absorption. You have the tripeptides, dipeptides, and amino acids are absorbed by co-transport into the epithelial cells. Co-transport. So you have sodium again, just like the first one on carbohydrates. Okay? Then amino acid exits the epithelial cells by active transport, and it enters the blood capillaries, which is number 3, and it will go to the liver. Then you have water and mineral absorption. Okay, what happens with the water and minerals that you had? Around 9 liters of fluid enters your small intestine every day, and around 2.3 liters are ingested in foods and beverages, and the rest is from your GI secretions, GI or gastrointestinal secretions. 92% of the water absorbed by small intestines, and 7% by the large intestines, and the remaining 1% is lost in feces. Movement of water is by osmosis, depends on the osmotic gradient. The most positively charged ions are actively transported across the small intestine. After eating your food this morning, it will take a few hours, then you will pass motion. Okay, so let's move to defecation. Feces are temporarily stored in the colons. Strong contractions of colon smooth muscles to propel your feces towards the anus, and this happens around 8 to 12 hours. Then these peristaltic contractions in lower colon and rectum are reinforced. Internal anal sphincter, which is the smooth muscle, relaxes, but your external anal sphincter, which is the skeletal muscle, is under voluntary control. Relaxation of external anal sphincter allows feces to exit through the anus. Now let's move to the easy peasy lemon squeezy questions. Number 1. The stomach mainly digests blank. Then number 2. When food is in the mouth, it is called a bolus. But when it enters the stomach to stretch when food is present, it becomes blank. I hope you got the answers right. Number 1, the stomach mainly digests protein. And number 2, when food is in the mouth, it is called a bolus. But when it enters the stomach to stretch when food is present, are called rugae. And let's relook on the learning outcomes. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in class. Have a nice day!